My entire life has revolved around the sea, but I still try to spend as much time as possible in or on the sea. I used to only do field experiments. I was always outdoors conducting field experiments, and that put me in direct contact with nature.
The marine biologist Boris Wurm has spent more than 10 years analysing how large-scale fishing changes the oceans. My focus changed because of an experience I had 10 years ago in the field. I noticed that every part of the food web I examined had been changed by humans. It starts with plants and goes all the way up to birds, whales and big fish. And I thought, we have no understanding of what effects we are actually having. The dramatic effects of fishing do not become apparent until the data are compiled from all oceanic regions. This is why Boris Wurm has collected catch data from all over the world for several decades, along with the detailed results of other marine biologists' research. At the end of this piecemeal work, an overall picture of the state of the oceans emerges. And the results are alarming. Since the 1950s, catches worldwide have increased fivefold. In the same space of time, the amount of fish in the sea has been reduced by half, especially in coastal regions, but also on the high seas and even in the depths of the oceans. Increasing numbers of fish species are being exploited to an ever-growing extent. Some 15% of fish stocks are on the verge of total collapse, and many more are headed the same way.
The consequence for our ecosystem is that species can no longer fully play their ecological role. For example, if a predator fish no longer controls the population of its prey, and in turn their numbers explode.
%90 of the big fish in the world's oceans are gone. All this in 50 years, in my lifetime. We have had more impact on the wildlife in the sea than during all preceding human history.
Let's turn the clock back a little. Some scientists say that in the last 60 years, stocks of large fish have fallen by 90%. They are warning that we are facing the collapse of all types of fish species in less than 50 years. The reason for this? Overfishing. Longline fishing vessels deploy 1.4 billion hooks a year. 1.4 billion hooks, each with a slice of fish hanging from them as bait.
%90 of large fish, the ones we love, the tunas, the halibuts, the salmons, swordfish, they've collapsed. There's almost nothing left. So for better or for worse, aquaculture, fish farming, is going to be part of our future. A lot of arguments against it. Fish farms pollute. Most of them do anyway. And they're inefficient. Take tuna, a major drawback. It's got a feed conversion ratio of 15 to 1. That means it takes 15 pounds of wild fish to get you 1 pound of farm tuna. Not very sustainable. It doesn't taste very good either. So here finally was a company trying to do it right. I wanted to support them. The day before the event, I called the head of PR for the company. Let's call him Don. Don, I said, just to get the facts straight, you guys are famous for farming so far out to sea, you don't pollute. That's right, he said. We're so far out, the waste from our fish gets distributed, not concentrated. And then he added, we're basically a world unto ourselves. That feed conversion ratio, 2.5 to 1, he said, best in the business. 2.5 to 1, great. Like 2.5 what? What are you feeding? Sustainable proteins, he said. Great, I said. Got off the phone. And that night I was lying in bed and I thought, what the hell is a sustainable protein? So the next day, just before the event, I called Don. I said, Don, what are some examples of sustainable proteins? He said he didn't know. He would ask around. Well, I got on the phone with a few people in the company. No one could give me a straight answer. Until finally, I got on the phone with the head biologist. Let's call him Don, too. Don, I said, what are some examples of sustainable proteins? Well, he mentioned some algae and some fish meals, and then he said chicken pellets. I said, chicken pellets? He said, yeah, feathers, skin, bone meal, scraps, dried and processed into feed. I said, what percentage of your feed is chicken? Thinking, 2%. Oh, it's about 30%, he said. I said, Don, what's sustainable about feeding chicken to fish? There was a long pause on the line. And he said, there's just too much chicken in the world.
To relieve the strain on wild fish, 47% of our seafood demand is farmed fish. But marine aquaculture is more of a nail in a coffin than a lifeline. Many of the farmed fish are carnivorous. That is, they eat other, smaller fish. 5 kilos of captured wild fish are needed to produce 1 kilo of farm-reared salmon. Aquaculture just converts low-value small fish into higher-value bigger ones. It does not create more fish.
Fortunately, not all fish eat fish. Tilapia, one of the most widely farmed freshwater fish in the world, is an omnivore. They can be raised almost entirely on plant-based proteins. Catfish is another aquaculture success story involving an omnivorous fish.
When I first started to work, catfish feed contained 12 to 14% fish meal. And today, that feed is about 1 or 2% fish meal. And this has resulted from research.
Shellfish are also being farmed at an ever-increasing volume. From the Pacific Northwest to the Mediterranean coast of France, this type of aquaculture is becoming an economic mainstay in communities that have been hurt by declining fisheries.
These are animals that stay quiet, they stay where you put them, and they clean up the water. You can produce absolutely enormous amount of food in a very small area. Shellfish, in fact, have the potential of feeding humanity.